Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome. This is a webinar by HIMSA. I'm your presenter, Anders Damkjær Nielsen. I'm a product manager at HIMSA. HIMSA at this point is a little more than 30 years old, and HIMSA has the kind of unique role in the hearing healthcare industry that we're producing products that a lot of other companies are using. We're essentially creating some of the standards for integrated hearing care software. One of these is Noah and Noah ES that we'll get into in a moment. We number a lot of member companies, but we're a relatively small company, just 20 employees, split between our office in Denmark and our office in the US. And you might also know us from products such as the Noah Link, the Noah Link Wireless, and well, now Noah ES. These are the topics for today. The kind of overarching title is to lower cost for your hearing care business. So this will be focused a lot about on all the hidden costs that Noah ES can alleviate. We'll go through a very brief introduction. Then we'll look at kind of what these hidden costs are in comparison to what Noah ES already does. Then we'll look at the pricing for Noah ES, and we'll have some example journeys, different issues you might run into when your business is expanding, both when it's freshly starting out and kind of when it also gets some size. So let's start with just what is Noah ES. Noah ES, well, the E and the S stands for extended services. This is because it's kind of an upgrade to what Noah already is. What it is that it's Noah, but cloud-based. We've taken the database, the backend, and the management of this, and then we've moved it up into the cloud, so you don't need to have it on a local server device, and instead it's hosted by HIMSA for you. It's very efficient in the way that it suddenly allows you to access your database and your server no matter where you are, as long as you have internet connection. I mean, this is the whole point about cloud software. Suddenly you can access it anytime and anywhere as long as you have some internet access. And we even provide an offline license as a backup. So if you're using Noah ES and for some reason you can't connect, maybe there's a local issue with the connectivity, or you've traveled to a remote site that doesn't have any internet that you can use, there's an offline license automatically installed whenever you use Noah ES. And this basically permits you to use the local Noah, save the data there, and then export and migrate into Noah ES. Noah ES has a very high scalability, so it works for very large companies and chains as well as the small companies. It scales really well, so it also scales for a business that's in the process of growing. As we'll get into later, Noah system was never really designed to do that in the extent that Noah ES has been. It's been a large focus to have the scalability. So moving on to the hidden costs. There are a number of them. One of them is software updating. We all know software updating can be a pain, and I'll go into some of the pain points in a bit. We also know that backups, while incredibly important, can be very cumbersome. It's difficult to make sure they're continuously working. It's difficult to make sure that you've stored them in the right place. It's difficult to make sure that they run and that you always have something for when disaster strikes. Because in most cases, everything is going really well until you need the backup, and that's when panic kicks in. Network setup and maintenance. If you've used Noah and had multiple devices, you know that Noah has been made for this LAN connection. As long as you're in the same clinic, it's doable, and I'd say easy. But once you move to larger setups, when you have a lot of devices or you have multiple shops, all of a sudden it can get difficult and complicated, and maintaining this is suddenly not easy. Of course, also as we're moving into the modern world, we're seeing more and more data protection regulations. The old Noah, or Noah system, was designed so you can, of course, protect your data, but Noah ES has been designed to do more than that. It's compliant with GDPR and it's compliant with HIPAA. And while that's not something I'll be covering in detail this time around, it's important to note that there's a lot of changes in this area. The world and the industry with it is growing in this place, and it's important to keep that in mind. Then, of course, storage space. Over time, as you have more patient records, you'll need more storage. The old NOAA system was a bit inflexible when it came to this. NOAA ES is better. I'll show you a little later. And the licensing model has also changed from NOAA system to NOAA ES in a way that makes it much easier to just like kind of add or remove as you need it. So if we go into software updates as the first thing, the first problem that's kind of always been there is that software updates takes time. When a new version of NOAA is released, you have to take the time to upgrade all of your devices. With NOAA ES, we have the benefit that some of these upgrades actually happen directly in the cloud on the server side, which means you don't need to do anything. We just need an hour in the middle of the night, well, when no one is using it, and then we can perform the updates and they'll be freshly in there for you to use come morning. This makes it very easy for us to improve the product without forcing updates all the time, without requiring, well, the users to do anything. It also used to be with NOAA system, and still is with NOAA system, that when you're upgrading, when you're going from a earlier version of NOAA to the next version, you're going to need to make sure that your server and your client are using the same version. This is not the case with NOAA ES. As long as both versions are supported by NOAA ES, you can do them one at a time. So you can effectively do it more or less as you desire. You don't need to make these large or long downtime period where you're turning off all the software because, well, now we need to upgrade, NOAA, and that's a big hassle. Now you can do it a little bit at a time when there are no patients around and when it suits your IT administration. This, of course, lowers the amount of downtime because you can much better control when you are performing these updates. This also in NOAA system meant there could be a lot of planning. There could be late night work or weekend work to get this to make sense. And with NOAA ES, there's just less of that because you're not so reliant on doing everything at the same time. You can kind of do a little bit at a time, especially for very large chains. Once you have 100 machines, I mean, you're going to need to use deployment software and make sure no one is seeing anyone, and it costs a lot for the administration. Even for smaller clinics, you would also potentially run into this issue that 5 machines is still a ton of machines because it's still a workday that would, with the NOAA system, essentially be used just for upgrading, where for NOAA ES, that's not the case. Moving on to backups, there's always been an issue administrating kind of backups because it's kind of complicated. It's complicated because you need to find a setup that works for yourself. Do you do it weekly? Do you do it daily? Where do you store them? I mean, every backup is a copy of your database at the current time, and it's complicated and it's messy and it costs a lot of resources. In NOAA ES, this is all automatic. Because it's in the cloud and it's being handled by Microsoft Azure, of course, with a lot of HIMSA input, you don't need to do anything about the backups. You don't need to care. Well, you need to care that you have them, but you do. You don't need to figure out where they're stored or how many you're taking and so on. I'll have some more details on this in a moment. This also means you don't need to use the storage space on a local device. It's all inclusive in Azure. You don't pay more to have more backups. The backups are already there. And as I'll show you in a bit, there are far more backups available for far more types and smarter types of backups than you've seen previously. It also means that safekeeping them is a lot easier. It used to be when you had your backups on a local device or perhaps a drive you were moving around. Well, that could get flooded or stolen and you could lose your backups. And I mean, what do you do then? That's not the case with NOAA ES because, well, stealing Microsoft Azure, it's not something anyone can really do. There is no risk of like kind of the physical property being stolen, and people would have to tangle with Microsoft, and Azure is terribly, terribly safe. So it's really quite nice. With no local backups and with this device independence, you don't need to rely on specific devices to safeguard your backups. You're not really at risk of losing them. And as mentioned, there are more backup possibilities, which I'll show you now with a little model. If we assume that we have a normal week, it goes from Monday to Sunday. And at some point during the early part of the week, you see a couple of patients, add the patient records, move along, add some more patients at a later point, move along, and then at some point, disaster strikes. At some point, either during that day or during the night, with normal NOAA system, something goes wrong and your current database is corrupted. Now you need to figure out where your databases are. And well, if you took a database the last time when you added those 4 users, well, you would have lost the 2 newest patients, sorry, not users, patients that you just added. With NoAES, we're doing it a lot smarter. First of all, we take daily backups every 24 hours. We'll save a backup of your entire database. And even better than this, we're actually also every 10 minutes or so, basically saving the difference between the last time we saved and what's currently happened. This is a point in time restore for the technical people. This means that even if the problem happens at some point during your day, we can probably restore all the data except for maybe the last 10 minutes, depending on when the last of these incremental backups happened. And we also have another safeguard, even further, that we're actually continuously saving the data to a secondary region. So if something happens to the primary data center, you have an entirely different data center where all of your data is backed up, which means you don't lose it. Even if something really bad happened for Microsoft, it would need to be unfeasibly large before it would actually affect you. As for network setup and maintenance, it was always difficult having multiple offices. It was always difficult having a remote server because you would need these wide area networks connecting basically by VPN. You need to set up a LAN, even if you don't have multiple offices. You need to do all of this just to make sure that your different clinics could share the data. With NoAES, you guessed it, that's not the case. The networking is included as NoAES. There's no payment. There's nothing you need to do to make sure you have networking between clinics. It's just already there. It's networked by default. You can access it anywhere, and you can access your data anytime. What this also means is that you can have your Office 1, your Office 2, your offsite visit, and your home workplace, and you can access your NoAES database from all of these. And the only thing you really need is to bring a phone with a sufficiently, powerful hotspot, which most of them have, or you need to connect to the local Wi-Fi at whichever of these locations you're at. It really becomes easy as opposed to the old setups where you need administrators and you need to set up and buy these VPN products to make sure you could get a connection back to the clinic so you could access the data and so on. As for data protection regulation conformance, mouthful. As mentioned, we're HIPAA and GDPR compliant with NoAES. This is something that NOAA System had a difficult time being because NOAA System is an on-premise application, which means it's not actually capable of taking control of your data to the point of going, it's safe. I mean, it's on your device. You need to have firewalls in place. You need to have user access control. And while we could provide you kind of the tools for this, it relied on the individual hearing care professional setting this up and doing it correctly in like the legal terms. This also means that you could risk basically needing consulting hours to get this to work with NOAA System, because you would need someone with experience, if you don't have it yourself, to go in and kind of help you set up what is actually safe, what follows these guidelines, and what doesn't follow these guidelines. And it can be awfully, awfully complicated. And you could spend a lot of money basically just hearing about, what do you need to do to be compliant, when the alternative is that all your patient data is stored the way it's supposed to. HIMSA gets audited specifically on how we store this data, how we treat the data. We get audited once a year by a third party to make sure we are compliant with these things. This means the patient data storage and the backup, the access control of who here in HIMSA can access. I mean, we can't access your patient data. Only you can when it's in NoAES, which is also why it's so safe. You have it, no one else has it. And you even have to use your own email and a password you set. And we have multi-factor authentication or single sign-on. There's all of these things that basically allow you to control that you have access and only you and your colleagues have access. We can't take care of everything. With everything I just said, NoAES cannot do everything, but it can greatly reduce the load. Just having the kind of core of the data in a safe place, as long as you don't, do the move it out or send it over email and so on, which you don't no longer have to do, it's actually really, really safe and much, much easier to take care of. As for storage, For NOAA system, the story has always kind of been that it had 4 gigabytes of space available. This is what was in the old CE database, and it's also what's available in the SQLite. What happens then when your database runs full? Well, the only real option, well, there were two. If you were sticking with NOAA, you would have to go to a Microsoft SQL Server. You could, of course, also move to one of the NOAA-compatible business systems, though that would change the workflow. It's a perfectly viable option. But if you're going to the Microsoft SQL Server, you need to pay for the server device, for the server licenses, for the user licenses. You need the administration and the setup. And Microsoft SQL Server is not a simple setup. It's not a plug-and-play solution. It takes time and it can take effort. Once it's up and running, it's a nice solution, but you still end up presumably having your database in this local storage as opposed to having it somewhere like in Azure, where there are all of these other safeguards. It could also be mentioned that for NOAA system, our database backup functionality, that was never meant to run on Microsoft SQL Server. So anyone who goes to SQL Server basically has to accept that now they're taking the backup responsibility onto their shoulders. They are doing this to get more than the database limit of the original database. So if you're growing your business, if you're going to get above that size, well, NOAA ES provides slightly less data at a default. The reason for this is that we actually find that for the most clinics of 1 to 3, 1 to 4 users, they don't need, I mean, they won't even reach 2 gigabyte. 2 gigabyte is a surprising amount of data in most cases. But as the enterprise grows, you might need more. And why stop at 4 when you can have 150? It's pretty easy and pretty cheap for us to provide, once we kind of get across this barrier, to provide enough data that you won't need to upscale again. This is why there's an add-on for shops who need it, that they can go to 150 gigabyte, which is, well, more space than most people will ever need. It's also less than 100 euro per year, and it's not based on the amount of users. However, if you have 7+ users in NOAA ES, it is free, just as a little, well, a gift from us to you. Finally, in the hidden cost, we have inflexible licensing. If you know NOAA, you are probably aware that NOAA uses a site-based license system. For every clinic, you must have a NOAA license. That is not the case with NOAA ES. With NOAA ES, it's per user, meaning that you don't open a new shop and suddenly have to pay for the big license. You pay for the number of users you have in the new clinic. And if you're moving someone, if you have people traveling from clinic A to clinic B and working between the two of those, that's still only one user. We don't care how many places they work. We don't even care if they work in your clinics. We don't even care if you have clinics. We just care that you have users using NOAA ES and that you are having a good time. A good and easy time using it. So there's no more new shop, new license. It's also much easier to add and remove users. You no longer need to go into their, on the devices and kind of remove from the individual servers their users. Now you just remove it in NOAA ES. And the moment you remove the user, they no longer have access to your NOAA ES database. Simple as that. It's much, much more efficient for traveling hearing care professionals because you don't need any of the VPNs going back. You don't need anything. And also you don't need a license for yourself. The original NOAA licensing required someone who spends the majority of their time outside of the clinic to actually have their own license. With NOAA ES, we just say it's a user. Use NOAA ES wherever you please, in or out of office, and or out of office. So, questions so far, and I see that we have a single question now. Assuming modules are all still installed locally on the PC. They are. The modules are not strictly a part of the NOAA installation, but NOAA system and NOAA ES are effectively the same foundation. So the modules install on top of this software, and you can freely switch between the two, which also means that if you have NOAA system right now, 4.14 or above, with your modules installed, you can basically switch over to NOAA ES without doing any upgrade. I would advise going to 4.15 and of course following along with when the new versions arrive, because we're doing everything we can to make them better and to add, there'll be new features coming in the future as well. I can't speak much about them, but just know that we're, putting effort into making this NOAA ES not just a good product for now, but also a good product going forward. Then we'll briefly go to pricing. And that's because now I've told you about a bunch about all the pain points that you could encounter. But when you think about price, you obviously need to know what is actually the cost of Noah ES. Otherwise, it's really hard to consider. So Noah ES is a subscription model. So it's paid either monthly or yearly, and it's paid upfront. If you go for a yearly payment, there will be significant discounts. It'll be automatic payment by credit card, and then you can have the add-on of extra storage as needed. And here we have some of the actual numbers. You can also find the calculator at himsa.com, which has the most up-to-date pricing. And now I write the most up-to-date, but that's actually just for people who will see this in the future. The prices you see here are the current prices you'll find on our website. So you'll notice that there are different prices for EU/UK and the US. I have some examples as well, and I'm continuing with the EU examples. So the base price for an annual payment would be €14 per user. And kind of this base model would include 3 users. So that's the base price to have a Noah ES account. And as you can see, there's a total of €42 at the bottom. Then we have this price ladder implemented. So as you get more users, you pay less per user. So while the total is going to grow, the per user price is going to decline. So as you get up to 7 users, it goes down to €12 per month on an annual payment. And you also get the free extra storage. And then when you hit 50 users, it goes all the way down to €10. And of course, free storage is still a thing. So there are some savings as you move up. And I do believe that when you're right about 6 users, it might actually be better to go to 7 and get the extra storage for free. But don't hang me on that. I'm sure you can actually, I just advise you go to the calculator on the website, take a look there, because that's where you will find the prices, and it's very easy. The calculator allows you to basically set, how many users do you have? Do you need extra storage? Do you need anything else? Where are you, EU, US? And it'll calculate it for you. So that's very helpful. I see we have one question. Is data localized to the country you're in? It is not localized to the country. If you're in the EU or the UK, it is localized to Europe. And if you're in our US environment, it is localized to the US. As we're adding more environments, we will be adding data regions or data centers in the specific regions, but they won't be per country, in part because Microsoft Azure does not have a data center within every country. That's not really feasible, and in most cases, not necessary. If you're in the EU or in the UK, it should suffice knowing that the data is stored in the EU. And we can, of course, also give you the specific country within the EU, but it should not matter much because the GDPR and the UK version of the GDPR essentially cover that this is fine for people who live and operate in the EU. Then I also have some examples for you. The examples are journeys. Well, the first journey here is supposed to show the various hurdles you might, some of you probably already hit them and overcome them, but it's just kind of to show some of the pain points I've just marked. So if we start at the founding of a company, you'll see in the top right a little bit of statistics on this company we've just made, this fictional one, I might add. We have 1 user, we have 1 device, we have 1 shop. We're running the default database type in Noah. This is just a perfectly normal Noah installation, freshly downloaded and installed. A Noah license has been bought, and we don't need any networking because we're just a single user. Then, of course, over time, this is going to grow. Over time, we're going to get more colleagues. We're going to get more patients because we're more people. We're going to have more devices because all of a sudden we want both, a computer out front when they come in, something that we can use to take their name, and we want the fitting booth, and we want the measurement booth. And, at some point, this will create a requirement for multiple devices. And when this happens, we hit the pain point of local networking. All of a sudden, you're going to need your Noah devices to connect to the same server. This could also be a reason for why you'd suddenly have more devices than you have users, because you need another device standing out in the back running the server. So regardless of which of the users is currently in the clinic, in the shop, you can, connect to your server. You don't need to rely on, Bob having the server and bringing the server into the office or something like that. Then there's a possibility of unforeseen data loss. This could be, as I mentioned before, physical theft or losing of the device. It can happen, and it is dreadful when it happens. And it's a problem because you might lose, like in the worst case, you lose your database. And losing your database could mean that you lose track of, where are the patients, who are the patients, not to mention that it's a compliance issue. I mean, I don't need to explain why that's bad. Everyone knows it, and luckily it's quite rare, but it is still a problem that you can, as we'll see later, circumvent by not having any data locally. Then over time, of course, you would recover from something like this. You would get your patients back, you would get new patients, and as you get more and the clinic grows, you will get more users, which will in turn, turn into more devices. And at some point, you will hit the current wall in NOAA system, which is called 4 GB. You can have 4 GB worth of patients, and that's about 16,000 patient records. Not entirely, though, because it depends what you save, but just for example's sake. This means that if you're continuing on NOAA system, you would need to go up to either an MS SQL server, or you would need to move over to a NOAA compatible management system that supports a larger database. Or, of course, you could go over to NOAA ES, but again, we'll return to that. Then at some point, you also want to open another shop. This could have come earlier in the timeline, or it could come now, it doesn't really matter. But all of a sudden, you have multiple shops. This means that you need to connect devices from one shop to devices in another shop. This means that your network can no longer be a LAN network. Now you're going to need a WAN, you're going to need a wide area network, you're going to need VPN tunnels to connect them or something similar. All of a sudden, the networking gets actually really complicated. And this is probably the point where most companies figure, well, we need a user. We actually specifically need someone employed to just take care of that. Whether it's full-time or not, doesn't matter. It's still money that has to be spent on basically making sure the network is running. And I mean, that's not the most interesting part to kind of use your own business hours on. And it's also not something that strictly grows your business. It's just something you have to do to keep the infrastructure up to date if you're running NOAA system. And then, of course, sooner or later, HIMSA will release a new NOAA version. We are trying to make our software better, but this will also require updates. As mentioned before, this means that at some point you will need to upgrade your NOAA from whatever it was to whatever is the new version. And when doing this, you will create downtime because you have multiple devices, in this case 12. And if one of those is a server, I mean, it doesn't matter. You will need to take the server down, you'll need to upgrade it, and then you'll need to upgrade all the clients before they can get back on. This is potentially a lot of time. And I mean, if you have 9 users not be able to work for that day, or you need to hire in some consultants to do this work during the evening, it's still potentially a lot of money and or time that you're spending on this. And then, of course, there's the chance that data policy laws change. As we know, we're in a modern society and the world is moving forward. And this means that you should think about compliance. Are you compliant with what's currently required by the country you're living in? And NOAA system won't help you with this. NOAA system will, as it is, continue to exist the way it always has, where it provides the tools to protect your data, but it requires you to administer it. There isn't really anything NOAA system can do to alleviate this, which can in cases mean that you will need consultants to come in, and they can be pricey, and they'll need to inform you and guide you what actually needs to be done. And of course, when you have a lot of users, you might also need access control. Maybe you have some users who shouldn't be accessing all of your data. Maybe you begin to have users, or rather colleagues, who don't actually need the NOAA database. Maybe you have a secretary or an administrator that shouldn't access the patient data for compliance reasons. And this means you have to have someone controlling who has, access to the data you have. And this will cost time, if not money. Someone has to do it. and Noah system is not the most elegant way. And as the growth continues, I'm sure you can see that there could be more of these. Also, many of these will, happen. They can repeat. I mean, if you've opened one shop, why not open another? You can always use more colleagues. A new Noah version will come sooner or later, and data policy laws will change, which means this is not unlimited. You will not get over this hurdle like after a year and then say, poof, that's it, we're done. No more administrating. We're done. No, it'll keep coming back in one version or another. Which is why I now think that we should look at the same journey, but what if we were using Noah ES? So it's the same journey and it's the same starting point, with the exception that the database type is, of course, the Noah ES Azure database. It's also technically a SQL database, but that's too technical for this conversation. And in regards to network, you'll also notice it says automatic because it doesn't need to be LAN, WAN, or VPN based. It's just built into the product. So the first hurdle is the same one as before. You get more colleagues. As you get more colleagues, you simply add them to your account. You have a number of users in your Noah ES account, and you just, you have yourself, and then you just add the next people as they come in. It's really that simple, getting more people into the system and getting them to use it. Unforeseen data loss. Now, here the example was physical theft. Now, that's, I want to say good luck stealing Azure, right? The databases are not just big, they are, safeguarded by Microsoft in massive server rooms. Physical theft does not happen because they can't steal your device. When you log into your device and access your Noah ES data, we're not downloading all your data to the database so a thief could come in and take it. What we're doing is that we're only basically saving the data that you're accessing at that moment using your personalized account. So we're making sure that there is basically no connection to the data afterwards. When you're done, when you log out of Noah ES, no data is left behind that could be used to identify or steal or in any way interact with your patients because they were there, but they're not anymore. And they were encrypted the whole way down, and they were encrypted in storage and so on. So yeah, it's really not a problem. Then, of course, for Noah ES, the database default is slightly smaller. It's only 2 GB, which means you would in theory hit it sooner. But once you upgrade to the 150, or once you have 7+ users, that won't be a problem for, at all. And there'll be no administration involved. Essentially, you'll just go to your Noah ES administration portal and you'll check a little checkbox. And then the next time you receive an invoice, that invoice will include this, assuming you have less than 7 users. And then your database will have the additional storage. It's that quick. Then at some point you want to add another shop. And while there's a lot of other stuff you need to take care of when adding a shop, finding the site, purchasing the equipment, getting it looking nice and so on, Noah ES should not be one of the complications here. Because Noah ES works the way it does, you would just add whatever colleagues are going to be working in this new shop. You'd add them to your Noah ES account, and they'd have access to the database even though they're in the other shop, which is everything you need to do. There's no other steps to get Noah ES functional over there than installing the software and having them log into their accounts. Then, of course, at some point, a new Noah version is going to come along. And for Noah ES, there are still going to be new versions of the on-premise software. We can't, and we probably won't stop making new versions, because whenever we make a new version, it is either to add a feature or to correct something or to make it better or more efficient. And this will also be the case in the future. It would be, silly to think otherwise, because there's still much potential and there's still much that can be done to make the experience better. However, with Noah ES, as mentioned, you don't need to take this massive downtime where you shut down the whole business for a day. You just, when you have some time, half an hour, you click the install Noah button after downloading the new software from our website, and it'll install on top of the Noah you already have. Your modules will keep working, and once it's done, you will log in with your Noah ES account just like you normally do, which means every user is looking at, probably less than 30 minutes, assuming the machines are, in all right condition and not really old. And they need to do this, or they can do this separately. Or you can have, if you have administrative personnel, they can come in and they can do it, one machine at a time. They can do it over lunch. You can do it over a couple of weeks or a couple of months if you want, because the Noah ES versions don't move forward quickly enough to, at the current time, force anything. So you have a lot of time to do it. There is a lot of benefit to being on the newest versions, but you will hopefully also find in the future that they'll add features that are desirable. So it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like yes, we want this. This is good. And as data policy laws inevitably do change, well, Noah ES is going to keep up with those changes. Noah ES being cloud-based is going to make sure, we're going to make sure when those changes occur that we consider them and act accordingly to make sure that we, and by extension you, are following the laws and being compliant in the regards that we can. So another burden off your shoulder. No consultancy hours needed there. And then we have this access control. You have a lot of users and you need to control what data they have access to. Well, it's pretty easy because when you added them to your Noah ES account, that was when you determined what access they had. And you can still tailor this. You can change it over time. When someone leaves your office, you can kind of just remove their Noah ES account. And I don't mean kind of, you actually just go in and you deactivate their user. They can no longer log in. They are completely cut off from your Noah ES system, cannot interact with anything, cannot, the portal, the patients, the software, nothing. Even if they're logged in, it'll be a matter of a couple of minutes. If they're logged into the Noah ES client window, it'll be a couple of minutes and then they'll be logged out and we'll go, you cannot access this, get out. So yeah, you've already kind of done it when you've set up Noah ES, and it's really easy to add and remove users at a later point. So there is, of course, still the requirement for software, but hopefully this kind of displays how it's actually many of these pain points, many of these hurdles are basically handled by Noah ES by just the fact that the product does what it does automatically without you having to get involved, without you having to get consultants or administrators or new databases or anything like that. Do we have any questions or topics? But otherwise, we'll just move on to the suggestions for topics. And I think this one was more of a suggestion for a topic. Enterprise-wide solutions, tips and tricks. It is complicated because I don't have a lot of good tricks for large enterprises when interacting with Noah ES, at least not yet. If I am to say something, I would say pay attention to groups and locations. If you're a large company, you should pay attention to how you want your patients divided before you kind of move into Noah ES and when you're in Noah ES to make sure they're segmented the way you want. I would advise, if you don't know about this groups and locations topic and you have more than one clinic, I'd advise you head to noahes.com and read it, because there is a description of this feature. It can be kind of complicated to get into and understand, but it's very useful. A second thing is that all the administrative tools would be in the browser. So bear in mind that your administrators can, access Noah from anywhere. They can do their duties without having the Noah software. And you can also, when you yourself are on the move, use the browser to check up on things. You can see the activity log and such. And of course, if you think you are experiencing, or if you perceive that you're experiencing issues when you're using Noah ES, I would advise checking on the status pages. HIMSA provides a number of places. One core place, which is our status page, where you can see, everything that's currently happening, including maintenance, if there are anything, any issues, any known downtimes or any known issues. They'll all show up on noahes.com under the status page. Then I was asked the pricing for subscription and migration of 3 existing offices into a single database. Now, because Noah ES is user-based and not office-based, I can't actually answer that because I don't have the information. But if we assume that there are 2 users per office, so we assume 6 users, it would be either $90 a month or €84 a month if it's on an annual subscription. The actual migration part is free, and doing it into one database is very easy because you are essentially doing the same thing if you're doing it into one database or into multiple databases. And in a case like this, you would never do it into multiple. You would just run our migration tool that we make. It would move your data. Of course, you'd need to write in your email, your password. It would move your data into NoahEAS, and then you would repeat this for all the 3 clinics, and it would combine it into one database. And in the case you have some patient duplicates that are 100% the same, and we can tell this because we have an identifier in the patient. If you have patients that are 100% the same, it's actually smart enough to go, oh, I recognize this patient. This is the same. And then combining those, and we also have a tool for those where we're not so sure, where we're like a 90% sure, or basically anything less than 100. And you can use that tool to basically combine duplicates in your database after you've done this, so you can get rid of all those pesky duplicates. Then there was a request for a topic: marketing strategies and front office excellence training. And while it's interesting topics, they're kind of outside of HIMSSA's area of expertise. Though it should be said, with NoahEAS, when you are receiving your support, you'll actually be going directly to HIMSSA at the moment. We have a help desk and we have some materials online that you'll be using. So while we can't help you with marketing strategies and front office excellence training, you're still welcome to contact us, either if you have interest in NoahEAS or if you are in need of help, once you've set it up. And can I install Noah 4 on my second laptop to be used by my assistant in the same place? And the answer is yes, for both NoahEAS and Noah System. With NoahEAS, it's very easy because you don't need to do the networking. If you want to be working on the same database with NoahEAS, you just add their email into your NoahEAS account, have them log in, and then they have access to the database. And then there was a question: is this valuable for my mobile business? And jumping to the answer, I would say so. I would say that the benefit of accessing your database anywhere, anytime is exactly what you would need for a business where you move a lot. If you move a lot between different locations, it seems safer to have your data in the cloud. I mean, someone who moves a lot is at more risk of losing their device, lost in transit, or for any number of reasons. And having the information in the cloud just seems a lot safer. Also, having the access to it everywhere is, of course, nice and necessary, though you would also have that when you bring a local device. But again, the safety of not really being able to lose it should be nice. And if you have multiple users being mobile within the business, well, they can all use the same NoahEAS database and be, entirely different places, no problem. Is there any additional cost if I add an employee in the future? Well, the cost would increase per user, but the price per user gets lower as you ascend the price ladder. So, I mean, the price would scale with how many people you are using it. And finally, we have the open floor. Hi, can we use the opportunity to merge multiple local databases by moving to NoahEAS? Does any tool or guideline exist to perform this? I see. That might have happened right before I mentioned the migrator tool. Actually, the last webinar I had, I very briefly showed the migrator tool. It's quite simple and it's quite easy. And essentially, yes, exactly what it does is taking the data from your local Noah system database and then moving it into the NoahEAS database. It's a little bit like if you exported all your patients into the NHAX format and then imported them, except our tool is made in a much smarter way. So instead of doing it one patient at a time, we're doing it in bulks. So you don't have to spend, days doing it. It'll just take, depending on the amount of patients, but 20 minutes. 20 minutes for like a database of less than 2 GB, assuming connection speed and so on. But yes. And there are indeed guidelines to use the tools. The tool is well documented on noaheas.com. It's under migration, and actually, if you go onto noaheas.com and you go into the sign up and you ask for the trial, we will respond to you with like, here is a trial, and also here are guides how to use the migration tool. So you can use your first 30 free days. Just try to use the migration tool. Try to move your data up. And then once you've verified that the data looks nice and right, which it will, but just so you can feel secure as well, then basically at that point you can make the decision if you want to continue with NoAES and just continue paying for it. So yeah, and we can help you a bit with it as well. I will say, out of the majority of our users, and we're probably talking 95% of the people we currently have using NoAES, people don't generally need any help using the migrator. And it's not because we are only having administrators at massive companies. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. We have a lot of perfectly normal audiologists that are just working their day to day, wanting NoAES, and they use the migrator as it was nobody's business. Like they are, well, it's an easy tool, and we're very glad that they so easily kind of fall into it and have confidence in it. Are all modules you can install / use in NOA system compatible with NoAES? Yes, every certified module you'll find on the HIMSA website is compatible with both NOA system and NoAES. So if it's HIMSA certified, it's compatible with both. Does anyone else have any questions? Do I have a test or non-production environment? I do. It does require that you're a HIMSA member company to get access to it. But if you are a HIMSA member company, you actually get access to it as part of being a member, assuming you're the correct type of member company. I won't get into all the details on that here, but yes, we have a QA environment that is available to member companies. I mentioned that, or you mentioned that NoAES is third-party audited. Is that based on an audit standard? Can the results be shared with the large IT departments? We receive a report by the end of it, which we can freely share. It's a company called Deloitte. You may be familiar with them. You might not be. I don't actually know how worldwide they are, but they are fairly significant, I'd wager. And we get this report that we can send. If you want to see it, I would advise you contact us in our support portal. What's HIMSA's member count? That's over 100. So that would be the manufacturers making the modules. It would be the OAS companies making business system settings. NOA compatible management systems is a different word. I'm sure you're familiar with a few. It would be particularly large chains who've decided to build their own systems for their own internal use. It would be, well, there's the manufacturers, then there's the audiological equipment manufacturers. A number of those are HIMSA members as well. And I feel like I left someone out, but we do have a couple of other member types. There's some like ear scanning, which is not a specific member type and so on. There's a lot of details for that. If that has interest, I'd say that's a bit above like the normal hearing care practice level. But if there's interest, you're welcome to contact us for that as well. So this is my wonderful ending slide. I know it is very, very beautiful. So if you want to know more about NoAES, I'd go to noaes.com. If you want to know more about the NoAES pricing and HIMSA in general, I would go to himsa.com. And I've been your presenter this evening, or this late afternoon, Anders Damkjær Nielsen. Thank you, and see you next time.